Do, 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 do.
We're recording, Bill.
I'll stop singing then.
I think we're recording.
I think we're recording too.
Hello, Bill.
Hello, Sandi. How are you?
I'm fine. One of my favorite things
See, it's now stuck in your head.
is... Okay, this evening, living memory.
Okay.
Conversation with Bill Wadman. That's you.
Me.
Do we tell ourselves stories about our lives? Like, is our past kind of like a tale to tell?
Or do we create our own myth of our own lives?
Kind of, yeah. You meet someone new, they say, where are you from? You start talking and you tell them. It's kind of like telling a story, isn't it?
Sure. Do you ever wonder whether or not you're actually telling the truth, even if you believe it to be the truth?
I do wonder about it.
Yeah. Did that actually happen the way you remember it, or has your memory changed over the years from having recalled it so many times?
Well, that's the thing I think I want for us to really explore this evening, is this sense that, there's a relationship between our lives and truth, but there's a kind of tolerance or a range of what that could be or what that might mean. And I wonder, when we tell stories about the past, not that we're fabricating things entirely, but that perception makes a new story of the past each time it's remembered, I suppose.
I mean, you can go one further and say, is it wrong? Even if it's not actually the truth, what does it matter if you embellish or change your own story?
I suppose that would have other kind of conditions on it, wouldn't it?
I mean, within reason, it's like, okay, I didn't go, slay the giant or something like that, but I can say, oh my God, the stars were out the night that X happened. Like, whether or not the stars were out doesn't really change the story,
Well, I mean, I think some of us make things very romantic in the past.
I'm sorry, some of us?
Or, some of us make the past much more dramatic, maybe.
Sure.
Some of us play down the past.
Yeah, the flip side is how often do you leave things out that you don't want to remember?
Yeah.
You certainly don't want other people to remember.
Yeah. And I wonder what we ask of the past. Do we ask things of the past, in that, this is maybe quite subtle, but we sort of have an expectation or a complacency about the past because we believe we remember it. But I wonder, in the remembering, if we actually ask the past what it is that...
Wait, we're personifying the past now?
No, it's not to personify it. I suppose it's like asking questions myself. It links in with what we were speaking about before, where kind of like, if we question ourselves, do we already know the answer? Otherwise, we wouldn't be asking the question. We don't ask questions unless we know, because unless we know, we don't have kind of like the psychological space for the question. And in the past, I wonder if we can sort of ask something of it that reveals something new to us. And I do think that can happen, because maybe a memory shifts or parts to be kind of reveal or to be revelatory in some way. There's some kind of revelation in considering things about the past. And I don't know if you've ever done that, thought about something from the past for a long time and tried to view it maybe from, I don't know, different perspectives might be a basic way of putting it.
You're describing the last 47 years of my life. And
that something then kind of yields from it.
It's you ever heard the old thing where somebody was watching some movie? Oh, it was somebody was talking about E.T. the other day. And they said that when they watched it as a kid, whenever the mother got involved and was like terrified of for the kids, for whatever, the alien, whatever it is. And they were just like, Mom is ruining everything for everybody. And they said, now they've watched it for the first time as an adult. And they're just like, oh my God, you need to protect your children from that crazy alien. Like they just saw it from exactly the opposite side. Right. And I think that there's sometimes those things happen, right? Where sometimes you see moments of your own past from a different perspective. If you perhaps have, I don't know, like grown into the position that say your parent was in or some adult was in at the time of the memory, and you see it from a different point of view, you know? And sometimes that can push a cloud out from something, you know? So it's interesting. Most people would use the term living memory to describe, say, you know, yes, Bill is dead, but there are still people alive who knew him. Therefore, he's still in the living memory. What you're saying is your own memory is living and changing.
Yeah. And this is the bigger question for me. And I come back to this question a lot, really. Like, is the past alive? You know, I've talked about this with various other people. And I talked about it with Alistair Heron at Ulster Uni on one of these things ages ago. I mean, he's an academic. He's a super smart person. I find other people's understanding of that question very interesting in itself. You know, is the past alive? I mean, the flat answer is no. It's gone.
Right. I think your perception of the past is changing, but I don't think it changes the facts of the past.
But then that's, you know, Bill, we kind of go from question to question now, you know, what is a fact?
Right. I'm just saying everything that happened in the past happened and can't be unhappened.
Well, hang on. I know you don't like questions like what is a fact? I know that that is a really disturbing kind
They're
of
infuriating to me. Yes, it's true.
But I think that's where the line of thinking goes for me, at least. You know, I can see what you're saying is that, you know, well, the past can't change. The facts of the past can't change. But I would then immediately come in and think, well, as you said a moment ago, perception changes even what you might consider to be a fact. And therefore, if those facts change with the perception that changes of it from the present, then there's a kind of quality of vitality.
But my perception is always not actually a fact.
No, your perception, well, no, is perception a fact? Is there the fact of perception?
Sure, but I mean, I think that that's a secondary reaction, right? I mean,
right,
if you had a video camera, if we had video footage of a car accident, my perception of what happened is irrelevant because we have video footage that shows that I turned the wheel at the wrong time.
No, but
whether I say you know,
all the sort of supporting evidence of the past.
Sure.
You know, the big events, maybe we could say, yes, the car accident is the fact.
Yep.
But everything else that happens around that incident isn't in the realm of fact at all. No. Or that the order of sequence of facts in different people's minds is very different. And the order of importance of fact is very different in people's minds from person to person.
And this is why eyewitnesses are terrible in courtrooms.
Well, but also it's just to really think then that if the past is changing all the time, it implies, to me at least, that it's kind of alive. And also, very simply, the past does live in each of us.
See, I just see that as our perception of the past changing over time. Which is fine, which is not, you know. It's interesting. Do you think that the bigger, not problem, but the more interesting element of it is it changing without you being aware of it, or you thinking about the past differently because of conscious thought, if that makes sense? You know, the way you think about your first kiss now versus how you thought about it at 16 or whatever, you know, that changed without you thinking about it much, just because it happened, and now 20 something years of, occurred between it. And therefore you see it differently, but it's not like you made a decision at 32 to think about your first kiss differently,
But I'm still asking myself, what is the past to me?
Yeah. Does it mean, well, I mean, does it mean anything? Is it so nebulous that it's really irrelevant what really happened, and it only matters what you think happened and how you feel about that?
Do you find that quite scary?
No, I mean, I think that it doesn't scare me, because I know that all of that it's a copy of a copy, It's like you're making changes to the copy. You're not making changes to the original reality.
I am aware that in remembering, in the very nature of remembering, I am thinking.
Yep.
And all thought is in the past. All thought is in the past.
I think you should bring our first slide up before we run out of time.
Sorry. Well, it's just...
I'm not trying to rush you. I'm just making sure that we have time to talk about things you want to talk about.
You are trying to rush me, Bill.
Yes, I'm new по-русски. I'm Russian. John Singer Sargent, one of my favorite paintings.
It's a beautiful painting.
Yeah, it really is nice. It feels almost fake too. You know what I mean?
What do you mean?
Like most John Singer Sargent paintings to me, his work feels strangely like a painting and strangely like a photograph of a moment. Even though they had photography at the time, it's almost more real than the photography at the time,
I think
like it feels very now, his
because there's a quality of, well, I suppose nostalgia, really.
Yes, but at the same time, doesn't it kind of feel like if I saw a photograph of that, I would wonder whether, if I saw a photograph of Victorian kids playing with, fireflies or whatever, it would feel old to me. Somehow in his paintings, this feels like it could be two girls with nightgowns on right now up in Prospect Park. Like it takes the history out of it. Like the intervening years melt away.
So has he made a timeless painting?
Yes, I feel like it feels more immediate than a photograph would of the same time.
But so let's look at the relationship then between, you, I think, agreed that it's kind of nostalgic.
Yeah.
So something that is timeless is nostalgic. Isn't that curious?
Sure. I mean, because I think it can be anything you want it to be. And there's something, I mean, I think a lot of his paintings, there's a magical quality to them. I mean, even, the Daughters of John Darley Boyd that I love, my favorite painting. It just, you can tell what those four girls are like. To me, like I have no idea what they were really like. In fact, they all grew up to be like living together, like, people who they all went a little crazy, right? But
they did.
Yeah. But in that moment, I can imagine if I was in the room talking to the 13-year-old, and I could imagine the attitude I'd get out of her,
I mean, he knew these girls. These were replacement girls. His first model was 5, and she was a real flighty little thing, apparently, and she kept moving, and he got really annoyed with her. So he drafted in the sisters, Polly and Bella, I think. I can't remember, but they were a friend's daughters. And this was painted, I think, near Henley on Thames, somewhere like that. I don't know quite the relevance of carnation, lily, lily, rose. If there's some kind of palindrome element or sense of mirroring.
Yeah. Is that the official title? I don't even know that. Okay.
Yeah, that's the title. It's a very evocative painting, which is why I put it here, because of that sense that we all have those moments that we maybe cling to in the past that bring up feelings of warmth or love or happiness.
But do you wonder whether, let's say this was in your memory, this is something you did as a child, and you were one of the people he was painting.
Yeah.
And let's say, the reality of it felt, or no, let me put it this way. Do you think that the reality of it could have possibly felt as magical as the representation of it actually feels?
Well, that's something that can be a very sad thing for people to consider, because we want so terribly to have these beautiful moments.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who dig into their past, and I think a lot of people, like even with their own kids, right? They want their kids to have some sort of experience that they may have had, but maybe it wasn't even what they think it was in their memories, and then they're trying to chase that with their kids. And it's a really interesting cycle that goes on there.
So yeah, so we're chasing the past as if the past is moving away from us.
Yeah.
Does that mean the past is moving?
As if it could be caught.
Yeah, but also does it mean the past is moving, Bill?
No, I think that the now is moving.
I know, but no, that's, this is very...
When you ask me that question, that's now in the past. So
I know, smarty pants, but can we just...
No, I know, but I know what you're saying though, but I think that there is oh my God, this painting is whatever, 138 years old or whatever it is. Next year it'll be 139. The painting is not going to change. You and I could have this conversation a year from now. This painting will be exactly how it is now. And yet there is something about the distance between then and now expanding that is discomforting.
There's also something in him painting over successive evenings. So he didn't make this painting in like one sitting.
Yeah, it's a blend of magic hours.
Yes, and he went back at the very particular kind of gloaming dusk that, well, certainly in England, there's the quality of light, that peachy pink suspension in the light. And he chased that for a couple of weeks, I think.
Well, you'd have to. I mean, he was fast, but not that fast.
Yes, but even that as a notion, to make a single image from successive moments and result in what everybody then reads as one.
Is that now no longer any of those moments, or is it a distillation of all of those moments and therefore a new moment?
In the painted form, it's crystallized, right?
Yeah.
But it moves with us through time, the painting. Doesn't it? Well,
yeah. I mean,
is this again territory you don't like, Bill?
No. It's just that, everything in the past is moving along with us.
Right.
By definition. So sure, that's happening. It's something interesting too, because the kid on the left has short hair like that, which feels kind of modern almost. Like you could imagine a kid with that haircut now.
Yeah.
I don't think of that as a particularly Victorian haircut. I think that also makes this more timeless. Like it's not like this was made in 1780 and everyone has like silly wigs and ruffled collars and whatever on, you know what I mean? It's like, it could be very,
we've entered the age of modernity already. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
why I put 1885, 1886, but I think there was some debate about which year he painted it in. But
That's Wikipedia says 1885, but yeah.
By that time, really, we had begun the descent into what we are now.
Do you see it as the descent?
Yeah, I think so.
It's not neutral and it's not positive, it's negative. What was so much better about, 1830s England?
Probably nothing, but I'm thinking more, I suppose, holistically. We've made progress as humans, and in the process, we've decimated our planet, for example.
Sure.
So it's not all bad. Progress has been made in that, women have the right to vote or to own property, or,
And,
all those things.
Yeah, you and I can become friends even though we've never met from 5,000 miles away or whatever.
That's an anthropocentric view of what is progress.
Of course, yeah. Most progress is human specific.
Yes.
Or considered so. Tell me about this artist. I don't know this artist.
Well, Chris Ofili.
Is that watercolor?
Well, I want to tell you about it in terms of it being, I guess, kind of like a story. I mean, the Caged Bird song was watercolor painting. And then Chris Ofili kind of outsourced it to the Dovecote weavers in Edinburgh, where they made a huge tapestry that went off to the Venice Biennale. In fact, I went to go and see it in Venice, and I missed it by a week.
Whoops.
Yeah, that could only happen to me, I think. It's very large, and it tells a story. Again, because of where we are, we can still see it. In the last panel, you can see the man with the caged bird. There's kind of it is abstracted, but it's also very, I would say, kind of almost like Caribbean colors. Something about heritage and storytelling that's not really of what one might think of. Certainly not of as kind of white English storytelling.
Yeah, there's like a vernacular kind of thing going on. Yeah.
And yet, to choose to have it woven as a tapestry is very curious interplay and overlap with something that is about heritage, something of the past. In that, one could say that, tapestry, for example, is not a common practice for art making now.
No.
Yet it's been used to accentuate kind of like the modernity of someone's memory of their heritage.
Yes, but by using a technique that is of the history of a different kind of people in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I would say that if anyone's interested in this piece of work, there's really, really lovely, I can't remember if it's a BBC documentary. It's quite short, 10 minutes worth, where they actually go to visit the weavers as they were putting it together, and how they felt, these very humble weavers in Edinburgh, working on this very grand, very proper art establishment piece.
Are Scots known for tapestries? I didn't know that.
I think it's just a very particular.
Like there was a place there that did it.
Yeah, so Dovecote is a really, really famous weavers.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Anyway, Chris Ofili. I mean, he's won the Turner Prize. He's, as famous, I would say, here as someone like well, maybe even like Damien Hirst. He's not the enfant terrible that Hirst might be, but he's certainly a very well-known name, an established name, and that's no mean feat. I think for Ofili, he's famous also for making paintings in dung, elephant dung.
Okay. Yeah, who hasn't done
that? Well, he works in Trinidad and Tobago.
How big is this thing? Is this thing like desk sized right now, as I'm seeing it?
It's huge. It's I'm just doing the measurements. It's what you might think of as a kind of, again, like a medieval tapestry hanging on a banqueting hall wall.
Sure.
It's big.
Do they backlight it when they show it? Do you know?
No, it's just on the wall, but it does have an amazing quality of luminosity.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Like I can almost picture it on a light box, you know.
Well, but don't forget, obviously, we're looking at it on the screen.
No, I know. I'm just saying that, you know, I could imagine somebody putting the real thing on a light box.
Anyway, the reason why I think I chose it for this is this idea that we have, each of us, a heritage and a kind of cultural identity underpinned by a history that we're not in charge of.
Yeah.
And
but then he's making decisions that shift his own view of that history using techniques that aren't typical to where the history is from.
Yes. And that gives rise to a sense that we might choose our history.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Because this may be what people remember from this generation of art from Trinidad and Tobago.
More that, you know, where do we place ourselves? Do we align ourselves with our heritage and our history as given to us by the culture we happen to have been brought up in?
I think the answer for some people is yes. And I think some people care about their heritage far more than other people do.
Right. But do we have the right to, and this goes into our ismist territory a little bit, do we ever have the right to choose our heritage? Or choose, no, not choose our heritage. Do we have the right to choose an identity that might be perceived to be falsely aligned with it? Isn't.
I mean, I of course have preferences of things, but I tend to think of myself as fairly heritage agnostic in the sense that I don't prescribe to a lot of that kind of stuff. So I don't know why I would choose something over something else when I don't really care about any of it. But that's just my own, you know, insane analysis. Just interesting. They lit this thing from the middle to the outside. So I'm just seeing the weird shadows on the thing. Sorry, go ahead. By the way, you were at 5 minutes. Yeah.
I mean, this took like nearly 3 years to make, or 2.5 years to make.
And wait, this is the watercolor version, or this is the tapestry?
This is the watercolor. But this is, it was part of it was called the Weaving Magic exhibition for Ofili. I mean, he really is a celebrated artist. I'm surprised you haven't.
It's because I don't know anything about art. And I'm not saying that to be self-deprecating. I really don't. Or at least I don't keep up with stuff.
Are you sure about that, Bill?
Yeah, no, I am actually pretty sure about that. By the way, you went and missed it by a week. I once went to the Louvre to look at Vermeers, and it turned out they were in DC on loan. Oh, no. I went all the way to Paris to go see something I could have gotten on a train to see this afternoon. I'm looking at the tapestry. Sorry, go ahead.
Time is really, really rubbish now that we've got this 40-minute limit on it.
Anyway. That's good. It keeps us sharp. Oh, your favorite Lynne Cohen.
Yeah. Again, I suppose there's a similarity for me between the Sargent and this, in that this is really evocative. It's kind of coated in the sense of memory that's not specific to me, but where it's very, very familiar. There's something, you know.
Well, because you like swimming. Actually, no, it's interesting though, but it's, to me, that I understand what you're saying. It's like there's two things to it. One, it's a long enough exposure that the water ends up being basically a sheet, right? But also there's no people in it to tie it down to a specific time. So it's kind of timeless in the sense that it is impersonal.
Yeah, but you know, do we insert ourselves into that past, into that memory?
I think looking at pictures like this, it's very easy for you to be the viewer to become the antagonist or the protagonist in the room.
Yeah. In that, you know, is there a sense of being present in this? You know, this is somebody's story. There's a lot more to this, you know, that we could talk about.
Do you think that the story is universal? The question is when things become culturally significant, I think they become less universal. It's like if you're putting them in a context, they are now no longer context free. Where you could look at this and say, okay, obviously it's an industrialized country and it's in the last 50 years just from the tile and architecture and all the rest of it. But beyond that, this could be in Dubai, or it could be in Russia, or it could be in New York City.
Yes, and I have to say, it's also assuming always that works of art are autobiographical in some way. In that, for example, Ofili wasn't necessarily making work about his own heritage, even though one might assume he is, just by the very nature of him being the maker, him being the artist. You know, he's looking at, you know, classical mythology and thinking about his interest in kind of gods and goddesses and the nature of things that are universal, that don't have anything to do with being, let's say, Scottish or American or whatever else. It is about an interest. And again, this is then about choice and how we choose to bring in things from the past that might not actually be our memory, be our experience.
And are we allowed to absorb those things and make them part of our experience?
Well, what do you think?
I'm sure people can. It doesn't interest me, but I'm sure it does to other people.
We're going to run out of time, Bill.
It's okay.
Will you come back and talk to me again about Chris Ofili?
Nope. This is I wanted to let you know earlier. This is my last show.
No right to us to ask. Bye, Bill.
Bye, Sandi.